College football has got a really difficult decision ahead. One of those classic difficult decisions, and I'll tell you what it has to do with. It's not transfer portal, it's not NIL. You know what it is? It's Saudi Arabia. That's the difficult decision college football has coming. And I know exactly what most of you are thinking. Oh, that same thing the PGA's dealt with? Yes, friends, the same thing the PGA has dealt with. Money is undefeated against morality in sports. I have looked at the records. I had McGrady pull us a stat sheet today, and it was like morality 0 and money 1,000,000 when it comes to the head-to-head matchup. So here's what's going to happen. This is what do we want to call it? An inevitability. This is coming. It's going to happen. Number one, you're going to have to choose your side. And then number two, you're going to have to ask yourself, could this be a game changer for my program or my conference, but especially my team, my program? David Ubben has been on a heater over at The Athletic. I think he has been writing some of the best features in what normal casuals would call the off-season. No off-season for us here, and apparently no off-season for David Ubben, so I would encourage you to go over to The Athletic if you haven't already. It's a couple of days old now. Read the feature he did, because you know what it did? It sounded a lot like something we talked about here, I think back in December. And what I talked about at the time was the Pac-12 being very vulnerable. And the Pac-12 was desperate, still are, by the way, as they're negotiating their media rights deal. And we don't exactly know when that's going to conclude. We think there'll be news sometime soon. But basically, the long and short of it is, you got a couple of superpowers in the Big Ten and the SEC, and they're just distancing themselves. And then you got the Pac-12 openly being told, we're not even interested in having you on our airwaves. I mean from the ESPNs of the world. At any price, we're just not even interested. That's bad. That's bad for leverage. That's bad for business. And I said at the time, maybe you'll remember this, I said, college football is ripe for either an entity or one person, ideally a multi-millionaire to a billionaire, to come in and essentially own a conference. Now, you can't purchase the actual rights to the Pac-12, but what you could do is you could come in and you could third-party broker a deal with a major media entity like ESPN that offers them that content for pennies on the dollar. And while it sounds like you'd be operating at a loss in that equation, you're not. What you're purchasing is messaging and marketing power. If I ran, as I said, if I ran Josh Pate Entertainment Enterprises, and I spent billions in marketing around the world, I look at the Pac-12, and I look at the member institutions, and I look at the TV deal, the distribution, in other words, that I could have with ESPN, and I foster a deal that's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and in exchange, I've got a great marketing and messaging arm in my back pocket that is attached to the second most popular sport in the United States of America. It shocks me no one's done this yet, but hey, it is what it is. Well, anyway, David Ubben goes, and he takes it a step further. He goes all the way overseas with it. He says, the English Premier League's done it. WWE has done it. When's college football going to do it? What is that, David? Oh, take Saudi money. And, of course, you know about the PGA, Live Golf, etc. Take Saudi money. When is that going to happen? So he goes and he talks to 4 athletic directors off the record. And it became very, very clear in reading the transcript of his talk with them that as he presented it, it feels like it took him off guard a little bit. But then, as much as you could feel this through a written piece, it's almost like you could feel and hear them stroking their chins. As David asks the questions, they go, that would never... Wait a second, hold on. Could that happen? Yeah, that'd probably happen. That's almost how the tenor of the piece went. One of them... This tells you everything you need to know about what moral platform these folks are actually dealing off of. One of them said, a few years ago, I would have told you there's a 10% chance of that happening. But now that Live Golf and the PGA has done what they've done, respectively, I'd say it's more like 50% of schools would be open to that. Well, obviously nothing changed in what is right and what is wrong perceptionally versus in real life. It's just, it's public perception. It's PR. That's all that's ever been about. It's the same thing with gambling. Gambling, sports betting, and taking advertising dollars from that kind of industry used to be totally taboo. You just hiss whenever a FanDuel or a DraftKings would be mentioned. Now everyone's in bed with them. Did everyone radically change their opinion on gambling? No. I'd say that Supreme Court overturn in 2018 had a lot to do with it, and the legalization of sports betting had a lot to do with it. But I was never told MLB and NFL and college football shied away just because it wasn't legal. I was told they shied away because there was something wrong with it. Did the wrong all of a sudden evaporate? Or did the negative perception surrounding that sort of partnership rapidly evaporate? Same thing with Saudi money as it approaches college football. Now, this hasn't happened yet. The idea amongst many, including the folks that David Ubben was talking to, some of the folks I've talked to, myself, just using intuition and nothing more, is that this is an inevitability. You're going to have to answer that question. College football is going to have to answer that question of, do we take Saudi money if they come towards us, either a conference as a whole or an athletic department? Let's say you're a little cash strapped. Let's say you're not Alabama or Ohio State. Let's say you're a mid-tier. And let's say you're watching those big boys disappear off in the distance. There's no shot of you catching up using traditional methodology. And all of a sudden, you got the Saudi money sitting there that you know would instantly put you neck and neck with them in terms of a P&L. And by them, I mean the big boys in college football. Your job's on the line. I mean, the future of your athletic department, your college football program's on the line. You know what the return would be. I think most of us, therefore, know what the answer is going to be when this opportunity does start to present itself, and it's going to very, very soon, because nothing's going to stop it. Saudi money knocks on the door of college football. What's really going to stop that? The NCAA is not going to stop that, no more than they would stop a normal booster donating to a collective. How are you going to stop it? It's all legal. I can assure you there will be no gentleman's agreement. Those never work in college football. Hey, I've got all the research I need here. There are 2 words written on this piece of paper: the Alliance. Anyone remember the Alliance? Rest in peace to the Alliance, by the way. That was when, the ACC and the Pac-12 and the Big Ten got together. They locked arms and they said, we're in this together. And then the Pac-12 looked around and said, where did the Big Ten go? Why are they over there talking to USC and UCLA? Hey, we got an alliance over here. No, you didn't. You never did. And likewise, I don't care how many gentlemen agree to each other's faces that they won't partner with the likes of the Saudis, because we know what happens when the lights go out. We know what happens when they disperse. We know what happens behind closed doors. And it only takes one to break ranks, and then everyone, it kind of becomes a free-for-all, and everyone breaks ranks. This will happen for like the 4th time. This will happen. There is tremendous value in doing this. So like I told you earlier, it stuns me that no one's done this already. The Saudis or just a random billionaire out there. When you look at the power behind the marketing and messaging play that comes with owning a college football team or a conference, I can't believe no one's done this before. Now, I get pushback sometimes on this because I've talked about this sometimes with you guys one-on-one or doing radio hits. And people say, Josh, that's stupid. You can't buy Michigan. You can't buy Minnesota football. Like, it's not for sale. Doesn't have to be for sale. And it doesn't take too big a brain. I know, because I figured this out to execute a little workaround here. I don't need to own Penn State. I don't need to own Tennessee athletics or Tennessee football. What I need to do is be the largest donor. And the largest donor, relative to what some of these folks spend for marketing in the real world, cutting a $15 or a $20 million check per year to South Carolina football makes me the number 1 voice in Columbia, South Carolina, by 10 miles. I get say in AD hires, I get say in coaching hires. They can't do anything without me because they become beholden to that money. Now, you may say, well, they don't need it. That's true. They don't need it. South Carolina, and I'm just using them as an example, would not need that kind of money for me to remain South Carolina. They would need it, as would dozens of other programs, to become more than the current version of themselves. You look at the gap between you and the top dogs, how do you make it up? You make it up with someone like me coming into town. And it doesn't cost a lot. If you think about, again, what I spend to run my fictitious enterprise in marketing and advertising per year, It's peanuts to drop 15 or 20 mil. That's a rounding error. That is a marketing supply budget for me if I'm a major global entity to dump into a collective over here in exchange for really having the biggest voice in the athletic department and, in a de facto roundabout way, owning that athletic department. Now, no one's done that to this point. You've got examples like Phil Knight at Oregon, T. Boone Pickens, et cetera, at Oklahoma State, but really no one has done it in the way I'm talking about. I think they will do it. And the marketing and messaging is very, very key there for reasons that I just mentioned. But David Ubben's piece just talked about athletic departments on an individual basis. He talked to athletic directors and he wondered aloud, what happens if Saudi money knocks on the door and your Tulsa or your Nebraska or whatever, not that those are equal programs or anything like that, but what happens? And there's a lot of what happens. There's a lot of speculation. I looked at it and I say, if I'm the Saudis, why stop at a team? Why stop at if I'm the Saudis, why stop at an individual athletic department? If I want to own something, why don't I just own a conference? And this goes right back to what I told you in December. If I were them, if I had that kind of capital on hand and I was aggressive with it, I'd go to the Pac-12 tomorrow and I would say, you can't get a media rights deal executed? I can, because I don't have to profit off of it. So you guys are looking for how many hundreds of mil per year? And they won't give you that. They'll give you half that, a third of that. Well, hold on a second. And I call them up and say, I'll broker the deal. I'll fit the bill. You just give me the distribution. You give me the time slots. And if you're uncomfortable with me, Saudi Arabia, paying you directly, if you don't want my name on the check, we'll just wash the cash. You ultimately know where it's coming from, though. I think they'd say yes tomorrow to that. As long as you could sort of wash it for public view, and washing, by the way, is what this is all about to begin with in the Saudis' eyes. As long as you can do that and you don't take slings and arrows for too long publicly, they'd do it tomorrow. Pac-12 would do it. A major media entity would do it. Saudis would certainly do it. And then they get the opportunity to do one more thing. David Ubben mentioned it in his piece. And this is where I think the value play is for anyone who's looking to score PR points, maybe even in lieu of an immediate return on investment, dollars and cents wise. There is coming a day pretty quickly, many think, myself included, that employment status is granted to college football players and college athletes in general. Many college athletes think that that will be the best day of their lives. It will actually be the worst day of many college athletes' lives because that will be the last day that their scholarship is ever covered. If you play one of the Olympic sports, if you're not a running back for the University of Oklahoma, if you're just running track and field for them, chances are your scholarship evaporates that day. Unless someone steps in. You know what that sounds like, by the way? If you come in heroically at the 11th hour, once the Pac-12 and all of college sports is granted employment status and therefore they cannot fund the Olympic sports anymore, so they turn into club sports and you're not on scholarship, you're not being paid what you would have been paid, and all of a sudden you come in there and you're looked at with that cape on, knight in shining armor, saving Olympic sports, including women's sports. You know how they'd talk about you? Talk about you a lot different than they talk about you right now if you're Saudi Arabia. That's the play, by the way. For those of you sort of ignorant to all this, that's the play. The entire game plan from the Saudis is they know what their global perception, they know what their global reputation is right now, well earned, might I add, and they want to change that. And this is called sports washing. And it's very effective, and it will continue to be effective because we care about sports a whole heck of a lot in this country. And college football is no different. So this is going to happen. NCAA is not going to stop it. Gentlemen's agreements will not stop it. There are very undervalued assets here, and there's desperation in the room. And I don't think I need to break out a calculator and explain to you what happens when that one plus that one meet.